And let's talk about this striking hearing last night with former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti, along with ABC News contributors Leah Wright-Rigueur, she's a historian, professor at Johns Hopkins University, and Barbara Comstock, who served in Congress as a Republican congresswoman from Virginia. Welcome all. But Leah, let me begin with you and those words. I don't want to say it's over, from President Trump's outtakes there. That sums up what he did. And in some ways, it's still not over, right? We're still talking about it. How much, just as a historian, what do you make of hearing that?
Well, certainly we know that it's not over, at least according to former President Trump, because he released a statement essentially calling the election once again fraud and repeating this idea of the big lie. We know that democracy is premised. One of the things that democracy is premised upon is the idea of free and fair elections. But it also means that when your side loses, being able to accept the law, accept the loss. That is necessary in order for us to exist as a democracy. We are now in a point, right, where even there have been in the modern presidency era, there have been dozens of elections. There have been bitter elections. Certainly, there have been elections that have gone to in front of the Supreme Court. But ultimately, what we know is that at the end of the day, people have accepted the results. We are now in an era where it's true that people are unwilling to accept the results. And this is what we're seeing. And they continue to refuse to accept the results. So that should be of concern for anyone. It's certainly one of the messages that was stressed by the committee over and over and over again during these hearings, which is this is not just simply a question of do or I like Trump, was Trump involved, but instead, what does it mean that the leader of the free world refuses to accept the fact that the election is over and that he lost?
And we all feel it, right? The fragility of the democracy right now. Polls reflect a real high level of concern among Americans about it. Barbara, the committee cast its hearing last night as an attempt to show that it wasn't that President Trump failed to act, that he was just chaotic and couldn't get things done. He chose not to act. That's their argument. He could have walked into the briefing room, right? There's a hot camera ready for any kind of emergency at any time. Picked up a phone, called other officials. He did not do any of that. And that is the picture they want to paint. Do you think that got through?
Oh, most definitely. And not only did he choose not to act, he did not act until he was forced to act because Mike Pence and General Milley, got the guard sent up to the Capitol. So his hand was forced, and he had to then do that tape really just for cover, because then the National Guard was sent up to the Capitol. So even though he didn't want them to go, he refused to send them to go, but he only said, "Hey, go home," because he knew the National Guard was then going. And remember, Mark Meadows was saying to General Milley, "Hey, you've got to say Trump told you to do it." And General Milley was like, "Yeah, hey, I'm not going to say that. That's not what happened." So he only made that tape after he knew the Guard was heading up there. So it wasn't even that he chose not to act. His hand was forced. So I think the intent, that 187 minutes, shows his intent was not to act. And then the only phone calls he was making during that 187 minutes were phone calls to delay the action and to keep this mob going. And then the tweets were also to inflame, and as Sarah Matthews said, to pour gasoline on the fire. And I have to mention his constant attacks on women, even though it's not just women who are testifying against him under oath. His White House counsel, his daughter, his family members, his attorney general, all of the men in his White House have testified under oath that A, he lost and he refused to acknowledge it, and that he refused to act in those 187 minutes. Yet he chooses to attack and intimidate women. This misogynist, sore loser is always trying to attack and intimidate these women who get death threats when he does this. Attacks and intimidates election workers and these women who don't have the protection of these more powerful men. And he's a threat to these people to this day. And this is an unfit, sick man.
And it is generally a sign of whether or not the hearings are effective, how loudly Donald Trump is complaining. And you're absolutely right. He's lit into these hearings. So we're not all want to ask you, there's a lot of people wondering if there's evidence, sufficient evidence to bring a criminal case against Donald Trump. As a prosecutor, what would that look like? Do you think that there are laws that he's broken that a prosecutor could prove beyond a reasonable doubt in court?
Well, obviously, we only know what evidence is public. And I will just say, based on the public evidence, to me, the most viable charge would be incitement of a riot or an incitement to commit an insurrection. That is fairly straightforward because the facts that you would need to bring that case are already public. Everyone knows that Donald Trump gave a speech. Everyone knows that the individuals who were at that rally actually were armed. You've heard evidence about that. We heard that the president knew they were armed. We heard that he knew that they were going to go to the Capitol. And of course, those individuals imminently, right after that speech, did march to the Capitol and violently attacked folks there, including law enforcement. And so, although there's a very high legal bar towards a prosecution like that, a First Amendment bar, I do think the evidence establishes that. But I will say there are other potential charges that could come, whether it's an obstruction of an official proceeding or conspiracy to defraud the United States. But I really think we need more evidence regarding the president's state of mind. And one thing I think was really jumped out for me from yesterday's hearing is how some of that evidence was kept back because of legal challenges, right? We heard Pat Cipollone invoking privilege repeatedly when he was asked about what the President Trump was going to say. We also, of course, did not hear from important witnesses like Mark Meadows, who was talking to the former president that day. And I really think that evidence would need to be elicited by the Justice Department pursuant to a grand jury subpoena, where those claims of privilege, I think, would ultimately be overcome. I think they could potentially, get themselves past the finish line.
That is very helpful, Renato, because I do think you lay out how a prosecutor would think about this and that there is a methodical process in order to bring a case. Leah, I want to follow up on a question I asked you the other day. The briefing interrupted us. One of the arguments against bringing a criminal charge against Donald Trump, if it could be done, is that the precedent of a sitting president of one political party, his government bringing a criminal charge against his predecessor from the other political party is a dangerous precedent for any democracy, for our democracy. It becomes a bad habit in a lot of countries. How do you feel about that?
So historically, there's been this agreement, essentially, between modern presidents, which is that you won't bring up charges against, prior presidents. We see it most explosively during the Nixon administration, where Gerald Ford preemptively pardons Richard Nixon for any crimes that he may have committed in the past and any crimes that he may commit in the future. We also see that even somebody like Donald Trump, who loves to kind of tout the idea of punishing his political opponents, in fact, doesn't pursue charges against Hillary Clinton and then, of course, Barack Obama, even though he likes to use it rhetorically. So for somebody or for a department, for a presidential administration to actually pursue charges against the former president would create an entirely new, I think, situation and scenario of which we don't know what that would look like. But certainly we are in uncharted waters. We've never had, in the modern period at the very least, we've never had a president that has incited with his words and with his actions this kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Extraordinary times. Sometimes are bad times. But Barbara, I want to go to one of the viral moments out of that hearing, that a photo that the committee highlighted, the infamous photo of Republican Senator Josh Hawley. There he is, raising his fist, rising up the protesters that were gathering at the Capitol already ahead of the riot. And then they showed Josh Hawley running for his life down the hallways as those same people he riled up attacked the Capitol. There was laughter in the committee room. It's been a lot of people are having a lot of fun with the sight of Josh Hawley so brave outside behind the police line. One of the witnesses said that police were upset because when they saw it, he was riling them up from a position of safety, that they were protecting him so he could raise that fist. Then he runs away. What do you make of that?
Well, as you know, I worked with the Capitol police officers to make sure that we would have this committee and have accountability. And it is so painful. You know, these officers have been at the most or all of these hearings. And Josh Hawley was a key person that caused this day. If he hadn't, you know, said he would take up this issue in the Senate, you never would have had this happen, because the House alone couldn't do it. Josh Hawley was the key person that made this all happen by bringing this up in the Senate. So here he was, all brave, doing this, then skedaddling and running there. So the mocking is very appropriate, because it was these officers who had to fight that. And it was painful for them to that day for them to be the ones fighting the battle on the front lines while he was taking cover. He could have gone out himself and said, hey guys, you know, hey, stop, do something. If these were his people, why didn't he go out and do something? Instead, he let them take it and take the battle. So he owes them an apology, which I don't think Josh Hawley has ever apologized to those men. And I challenge Josh Hawley to go out and apologize to those officers, because most of these Republican senators or members have never apologized to them.
And you could feel that in the hearing room. And one wonders if going forward, political opponents of Josh Hawley will just run that and make political hay out of it. But we'll see. Renato Mariotti, Leah Wright-Rigueur, Barbara Comstock, thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.